So what do you think about new sport bikes? What's up everyone, it's Alex. We're answering viewer questions again, so let's just do it. First off, let me apologize. I know I'm behind the viewer questions. There's only 7 days in a week and I literally get dozens a day, so I have to filter through and just pick them, and I get behind, we're working on it. So today's question came from Tony, and Tony asked, what do you think about the new ZX6R and the new ZX10R? And to that question directly, I would tell you, Tony, I think the new ZX6R and ZX10R are fantastic, amazing pieces of motorcycle racing rocket ship machinery. That being said, ZX6R, ZX10R, or any 600cc to 1000cc super sport race bike, that's a pretty big difference, a pretty big jump. So you really shouldn't be looking at the ZX6 and a ZX10. You really should be looking at, say, if you are in the skill level and you're in the market for a 600cc sport bike, you should be comparing ZX6R, R6, GSXR 600, CBR 600, etc. If you're in the market for a 1000cc sport bike, you should be comparing 1000cc sport bikes. Very different amounts of power, very different applications, and especially on the street. If you are on the street, I know a lot of people are going to disagree with this. I'm going to get a bunch of hate comments for it. Whatever, fight me. If you're on the street, you don't need a 1000cc super sport, okay? You may want one, that's a whole different thing. You're an adult. If you want a 1000cc super sport on the street, if you want a motorcycle capable of 180 plus miles an hour on the street, hey, cool. That is completely for you, to each their own, but you don't need that much power on the street. Matter of fact, most people don't need that much power on a racetrack. There are very few people on this planet that can actually harness the amount of power that a 1000cc super sport puts out, even on a racetrack, okay? All of that being said, what I would like you to think about more is, am I looking at a 600 or am I looking at a 1000? Which size actually works for me? And then I want you to compare bikes in that size range. Also, when it comes to brand new sport bikes, every couple years or so when a company puts out, like say Kawasaki puts out a brand new ZX6R, okay, the new one will be just tiny, slightly marginally better than the generation before it or than 2 generations before it, etc., okay? They tend to reduce weight a little bit, they tend to up power a little bit, and they tend to add electronic gadgets and widgets and quality of life improvements when they do this. But especially for street use, it only makes them very marginally better, right? Like if you're a racer and you're on a track, yes, reduced weight, increased power, more traction control, these kind of things matter to you. But if you're on track racing motorcycles, you're probably not watching and listening to my advice on 600cc super sports, okay? So if you're on the street, these improvements are only slightly better and only have, I would say, marginally more impact on your enjoyment of and ability to ride the motorcycle on the street. Disclaimer for that does not include when they started adding ABS and traction control. Yes, ABS and traction control can greatly increase, especially inexperienced riders' ability to ride them on the street. Sometimes it can mess up experienced riders because they were used to not having it, so they have to make that adjustment. This guy. But yes, ABS and traction control can be a huge help, especially to less experienced riders on the street. So Tony, what I would rather you focus on is there maybe ZX6s that you can find used, less expensive, that are a few years old? Because I'll tell you, especially anything after like maybe 2008 or so, 2008, 2009, anything newer than that is going to be a tiny framed, really, really light, really nice horsepower, really refined, fantastic machine. Even before that, I had a 2007 ZX6 and it was a little bit more of that like bubble fairing, kind of more round style to it, but I loved that motorcycle and that thing would go way faster than I ever needed to go on the street. So what I would say, Tony, is decide whether you need a 600 or a 1000 first, then sit on the different ones from different manufacturers, because a ZX10 is going to feel different than a GSXR 1000, is going to feel different than a Yamaha R1, CBR 1000, etc. I personally am a huge fan of Yamaha's bikes in those lines. The R6 and the R1 are amazing machines, especially R1s with crossplanes on them. Anything after like 09 or whatever with the crossplanes on them, fantastic. But sit on the different stuff from the different companies and just see what feels right to you. Because like saying a 600cc bike, between an R6, a GSXR 600, ZX6, CBR 600, the horsepower difference, the handling and everything is so similar and competitive because these guys are all competing with each other in those segments so tightly, that what's going to make the bigger difference to you is going to be how you fit on those different 600s or 1000s slightly. And then when you figure out which one works for you, say you decide a ZX6R is the bike for you, look and see if you can find one a few years old, because if you can find one a few years old for half the money, it's going to do everything you want it to do on the street. You're going to save yourself a ton of money. Usually, especially for less experienced riders, for people that aren't racing, I usually don't recommend going and buying a brand spanking new sport bike. Reason being, a lot of times on a brand new sport bike, you're gonna pay almost twice the money for not a lot more performance and everything, okay? Your return on investment going from a few-year-old used sport bike to a brand new sport bike, I don't think you're getting enough extra for the money to account for how much extra you're gonna spend on it. And you buy a brand spanking new sport bike, especially with less experience, and you drop it or something else like that, and then it's $2,000 to replace fairings and everything, you're gonna be a lot more sad than you would if you spent a lot less money on the used one, okay? So as with anything else, if you can find a good used option, I would always go with the used option. And when it comes to what do you think about the new sport bike in any category, I always say just sit on the different ones. You'd be amazed how many people would come into me, you know, looking for an R6 and end up being way more comfortable on a GSR 600, or want a CBR 600 and be way more comfortable and fit way better on a ZX6. So it's all up to you, it's all up to the rider. Decide which size you want, because there's a massive difference, and then sit on the different stuff in that category, figure out what fits best for you, and then try to find a used one if you possibly can, okay? I hope that helped, Tony. I hope that helped the rest of you. I'm Alex. Peace.